you have a couple of options, right? Either selling your Bitcoin and potentially paying a tax, or borrowing money against your Bitcoin as the collateral. A lot of banks are still kind of have allergy towards crypto. Police would come to us asking for some details. We would have to disclose them. Before you even jump into Bitcoin lending, you should understand the risks.
My guest today is Igor Neumann, co-founder of Firefish, the open market for Bitcoin-backed loans. Igor and I sat down to talk about the Firefish platform, the team behind the project, and the broader state of the Bitcoin market. But before we get into it, I'd like to invite you to join me at BTC Prague, the largest and most influential Bitcoin event in Europe. The event takes place June 11th through 13th in Prague, which, if you didn't know, is one of the most Bitcoin-friendly cities on the planet. Use my discount code CryptoSnake for 10% off your ticket. I'll see you in Prague. Hi Igor, thanks so much for joining me. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin-backed loans and, of course, Firefish. But first, for those who may not know you yet, can you share a bit about your background and how Firefish started?
Thanks a lot, and thanks for having me, Fred. Well, so basically, I'm one of the co-founders of Firefish. Firefish is basically an open market for Bitcoin-backed loans. We're based in Prague, in Czech Republic, but obviously Bitcoin-backed loans and Bitcoin overall is a global theme. So we do operate in multiple countries around the world. We started Firefish the idea started roughly 3 years ago. Before that, with my co-founder Martin, we spent most of our careers actually in traditional finance. So we're not the typical, crypto bros. As it always goes in life, the best ideas come with real life situations. So Firefish was also sort of invented, or we started Firefish when there was an idea, Martin, my co-founder's idea of investing in a business. And at that time, he was looking for some funding. And if you have Bitcoin, you have a couple of options, right? Either selling your Bitcoin and potentially paying a tax, or borrowing money against your Bitcoin as the collateral. So at that time, that was, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. The only options in the market were either DeFi protocols, where you're kind of wrapping your Bitcoin into other network, or the other alternative was centralized lenders like BlockFi, Celsius, and all that. And we know what happened to them. We've been basically brainstorming with Martin, like how to make this better, how to use Bitcoin, in its pristine way, and creating a platform or a way for people to basically borrow against their Bitcoin in a trust minimized way. That's basically how we came up with the idea of Firefish, making everything very simple, using only a layer 1 of Bitcoin blockchain, and giving people the opportunity to both borrow against their Bitcoin and also lend. So we are a marketplace. Basically, we're connecting these two parties. That was the idea. And 2-3 years later, we're where we at. I would say the traction has been going really well. I think especially native Bitcoiners do appreciate the fact that we're first and foremost not a centralized lender, right? So we have created something what we call Firefish protocol. We're not holding your Bitcoin. We're not holding your keys. We're helping you to basically fund whatever life needs you might have through our platform. That's where we started, and that's where we're at this point in time.
Awesome. Now let's talk about the risks. You mentioned Celsius, BlockFi, but I guess there are other risks with Firefish also. What are the main risks when taking out a Bitcoin-backed loan? What can go wrong?
Well, the first and foremost, I would say, and as always in Bitcoin and in general in crypto, I think the saying that do your own research is very important, right? Before you even jump into Bitcoin lending, you should understand the risks. And I would say the biggest risk, and that's something we've seen just recently, is a risk of liquidation, right? Basically, when you're taking a loan, you're depositing a higher amount of Bitcoin as the collateral, right? So that's the so-called LTV, loan to value ratio. In our case, the default LTV ratio is 50%. That means if you want to borrow, let's say $10,000, you need to deposit a Bitcoin worth $20,000. But as we've seen, Bitcoin still tends to be a bit volatile. So you should be always careful about the volatility, the price action. In case Bitcoin goes down, just like we've seen a couple of days ago, actually, you should be prepared either to repay your loan or top up your collateral, which is the easiest and the simplest way, right? So then there are a couple of nuanced things. I would mention maybe one particular feature. Our protocol basically, or what we call the escrow contract, where you're locking your Bitcoin directly on blockchain, has predefined paths, right? So it's not for us to decide where Bitcoin goes. Bitcoin can either go back to you as the borrower once you repay the loan, or it goes to the liquidation in case of you default on your loan, or there's this price event or price liquidation, so you know where your liquidation level is. What many people do not sometimes comprehend, especially in Bitcoin, that not your keys, not your coins. That means the return address, the address where you're receiving your Bitcoin back, should be fully in your control. And honestly, we did have one particular case where a user used Bitcoin return address from an exchange that disappeared meanwhile. So during the lifetime of the loan, that particular exchange was shut down. And then the user was like, okay, so where do I now receive my Bitcoin? And we know it's not like in a banking world where you can cancel transaction, you can route it somewhere else. Once you send Bitcoin to an address that doesn't exist or no one has access to it, then it's lost, right? So this is a very important element that I would also highlight as a potential risk. But again, most of our users, I would say, are well-educated Bitcoiners. They do understand that, as I said, not your keys, not your coins. That's why, this risk is kind of minimized. But the volatility risk, I would say, is the biggest one, yeah.
Let's focus on the protocol itself. How does the Firefish protocol work, like step by step? Can you walk us through the entire process?
Yeah, so I would say one of the things actually also what we're trying to build is a very simple way of basically using the platform for both sides, borrowers and lenders, right? So normally, let's say if we compare our platform to, let's say, DeFi protocols or some other platforms, you need to store your keys, you need to send transactions, you need to sort of be live at certain points in time. In our case, we've came up with a technology which is based on very simple, I would say, components of the Bitcoin script, which is multi-sigs, partially signed Bitcoin transactions, and time locks, right? So these three things have existed on the Bitcoin network forever. And we just kind of combine them together in a very particular way. So basically what you as the borrower, you're doing at the very beginning of the process when you're going to lock your Bitcoin is basically you create the escrow address that will be sitting directly on blockchain. You will always have full transparency of that particular address through mempool or any other browser. As a borrower, you're basically pre-signing particular transactions which are limiting the way Bitcoin can be spent, or it's limiting the way where Bitcoin can move. And Bitcoin can move only in four particular ways. One way is if you repay a loan, which we call obviously repayment. So, at the end of the loan, you return the money with the interest and you get your loan back, right? So that's the repayment. The second transaction that you're pre-signing as a borrower is a default transaction. So in case you do not repay your loan, part of your collateral will get liquidated to cover for the loan and the interest. The third transaction is what we call liquidation. And that's exactly when the price of Bitcoin reaches LTV 95%. So that's the liquidation threshold. So once you don't have enough collateral and the LTV gets to 95% from 50 to 95, then this transaction is activated and your Bitcoin, all the collateral is basically liquidated. And the fourth transaction, and that's the final one, there's nothing else that can actually happen, is what we call the zombie apocalypse scenario transaction. As you're locking Bitcoin basically on blockchain, the worst case scenario what could happen is that, Firefish disappears, the whole infrastructure disappears, something really terrible happens, the zombie apocalypse, let's say, and Bitcoin would stay locked there forever. But the fourth transaction is sort of what we call a recovery transaction, where you can actually, after a particular time in the future, and there's the time lock component. So after the particular time in the future, you can recover your Bitcoin back to you. That's the fourth transaction, and those are the only ways that Bitcoin actually can move from that particular escrow address.
How does Firefish make money? What's the origination fee? And also who pays that?
At this point in time, we're charging 1.5% per annum to the borrowers, right? So whenever the borrowers are locking their Bitcoin, this 1.5% of the loan notional is charged as the fee, and that's basically the main source of revenue for Firefish. We are also charging this 5% liquidation fee. So in case, for example, the lender says, in case of default or in case of liquidation, I don't want to receive Bitcoin. I want you, Firefish, to sell the Bitcoin on my behalf and send me the fiat or stablecoins. In that case, we're charging 5% fee, really just basically to avoid, some kind of spikes or have the cushion for the volatility in the market.
In case of Firefish liquidation, just mentioned that. How does it work? Do you liquidate manually? Is it like an automated process? Do you use certain exchanges? Can you specify this part, please?
I would call this the model hybrid, right? Because we didn't want to go a fully automated path, because you can imagine that, there's a glitch on an exchange or something, goes wrong. There's a data feed issue. You don't want to get people liquidated due to technical error, because as we know, once you move Bitcoin somewhere else, there's no way back, right? So the process is pretty robust. We're using feed from multiple venues, really to make sure that the price that we're looking at or the system is looking at is not just one single venue where you can have outage, just like we've seen in the past many instances, even at the biggest exchanges. So we're taking multiple sources, and there's, I would call it like this big red button in case we see that something is wrong, so that we do not liquidate the position because of some particular glitch, right? So it's a combination of multiple data feeds, of multiple trading venues, and obviously a settlement layer in between.
The Firefish protocol is open source, which is great. Has the protocol ever been audited?
Oh, yes. Even the protocol, both the protocol and the code, at the very beginning, we obviously wanted to make sure that we're as transparent as possible. The protocol itself has been published on our website since the first days, right? So people can really see the sort of the diagram of what's happening to your Bitcoin, what are the components of the Bitcoin script that we've been using. In terms of the open source, it's been launched last year with a bug bounty program as well. So, if you're a coder, feel free, go to our GitHub and check out the code. But also we've done a couple of audits, both of the protocol itself and the code as well, right? So that, for us, this is very, very important.
Awesome. Now let's talk about the numbers, the users. How many users do you currently have on the platform, and what's the ratio between borrowers and lenders?
Well, currently we're going to be reaching around 30,000 users, and that's from roughly 75 countries. As we're based in Europe, naturally most of the audience is coming from the European countries. But as I said, the way the Bitcoin-backed lending market is structured, we do feel that there is a lot of potential across the globe. So we've been seeing a lot of new users coming from outside of Europe, basically. And in terms of the balance of borrowers and lenders, this is actually the interesting point. As I said, like, we're a marketplace, right? So we're not deciding the rates, we're not deciding, what is the liquidity in the market and all that. So we let it up to the market to decide what are the best interest rates. So you as a borrower, you actually come to the marketplace and say, hey, I want to borrow, let's say, 10K at 6% for 3 months, and similar basically workflows. But in terms of the split, that's the beauty of the marketplace, that it kind of balances itself, right? So in case we have a lot of new borrowers, the rates might be going higher, but the more or the higher the rates go, it attracts more of the lenders, right? So we've done a couple of campaigns where we really had a great spike in terms of the borrowers, and the rates were pushed a little higher. But since then, a lot of lenders have kind of found these levels super interesting, and they started basically hitting the marketplace. And since then, the rates have been going significantly lower, right? So that's the beauty of the marketplace, that the supply always kind of matches the demand, and we do not have to sort of push for any sort of artificial rate settings or anything similar.
Do institutions use the platform as well?
Yeah, actually, on both sides. So we've seen naturally at the very beginning, the target audience or key of the core of the users have been Bitcoin maxis, people who do understand Bitcoin and collateralization of Bitcoin. But with time, we've seen more and more SMEs, high net worth individuals, or family offices actually coming to the platform. This is actually very interesting market segment of, I would say, the whole financial markets, where you can actually earn still very interesting yields, and your loans or your positions are, I would say, over collateralized, right? So the risk of sort of not getting your money back is super low. With time, there's more and more institutions coming to the platform. I wouldn't say we have any AAA rated major banks as the partners yet, because as we understand, the banks are overregulated, and for them kind of participating in this market is maybe not the right time yet. But we've already had discussions with multiple traditional institutions that would be coming to the market. I would assume maybe this year or next year already we'll see some bigger names in the marketplace as well.
I wanted to ask about your get instant loan option. 10.5% interest rate that guarantees a loan within 1 day. Since Firefish is a non-custodial marketplace, how are you able to guarantee that loan?
So this is actually also coming back to your previous question, if we have more institutions on the platform. As you can imagine, if you're an institution or company, asset manager, it would be very difficult for you to participate in peer-to-peer lending or borrowing, right? So we have created a special vehicle for institutions where they can deploy their funds, right? So they say, hey, I want to invest, let's say, $500,000 or $1 million at these particular tenors, at these particular rates. So once they deploy the money, there's a special vehicle that is providing these loans as the instant loans on the markets. If you really need the money very quickly, you can use the instant loan liquidity, and that liquidity is actually then pre-committed, right? So you do not have to wait for the counterparty to come to the marketplace. You already have the funds available, and you can literally receive, if it's stablecoins, it's literally sometimes matter couple of minutes. With banking transfers, like if you want to borrow fiat, euros, Swiss franc, and other currencies, obviously the transactions might take from 1 to 3 days, but this is the fastest basically way of getting liquidity as the borrower.
Right now, loans range from 3 months to up to 24 months on Firefish. Could we see longer terms, like 48 months in the future? You know, we have 4-year cycles.
Exactly. Well, I mean, when we started, the longest tenor was 1 year. Then we later added 18 months, and now it's 2 years as well. But really, to your point, like a lot of borrowers, a lot of Bitcoiners are asking for, in particular, 4-year loans. So because of the you can call it the cycle loans. Definitely, this is something where we've been working on. The one challenge maybe that I would see with 4-year loans at this point in time is that our loans are set as bullet loans. So you are actually sending money or returning your loan basically only at maturity, at the end. So there are no monthly payments, which is, I think, a big benefit for the borrowers. So, if I borrow money for 2 years, I return the money only after 2 years, right? So I do not have to make any monthly payments and all that. Now, imagine you are the lender and you are sending money to someone, and you'll need to wait for 4 years to get your investment back. Many things can happen in between, and it would be impossible for you as the lender to force the borrower to repay the loan earlier, right? I mean, they have the full right to keep the money for 4 years. So instead of really kind of launching let's say, fixed 4-year loans, we want to come up with some sort of a rollover loan. So imagine you take a loan for, let's say, 6 months or 1 year, and then you have the option to roll it over for one more year, and so forth to the future, right? So that's gonna make it much more easier to attract liquidity, because, as I said, like waiting for 4 years, God knows what's going to happen, for you as the lender. For borrower, of course, they would be happy.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But we're going to come up with a slightly different mechanism. But definitely we want to support longer term loans as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about stablecoins. What stablecoins can people use on the Firefish platform right now at this moment?
We've launched USDC as the first stablecoin because for obvious regulatory issues in Europe. So we're also launching Tether. So Tether will be natively supported on the platform within the next couple of days. So we're really looking forward to this.
So you mentioned bullet loans. Can a borrower repay a loan early, and how does early repayment work?
Yeah. Early repayment at this point in time is definitely supported. It's not a very difficult process. The only thing that we require is that the borrower requests for an early repayment, because as the marketplace is built as a peer-to-peer marketplace, you need both parties to collaborate or to kind of be online at certain time. That means if the borrower says, hey, I want to return my loan, repay my loan, and they send the money and the counterparty wouldn't confirm that they've received the money, we would need to go through a resolution procedure. So we're always asking for the borrower to say, hey, I want to repay the loan earlier, and the investor has to confirm, like, yes, I'm ready to receive the funds back. The process is very simple. Borrower requests, investor or the lender basically says, yes, I'm fine with that. The only caveat is that if you're doing the early repayment, you need to cover the whole period. If you have 1-year loan and repay in 6 months, you still need to cover for the rest of the period.
Do you see a lot of repayment requests from users?
So this is actually something that the lenders really appreciate on the platform, because there has been a lot of requests for early repayments, especially when the markets go down. around. The interesting fact is that we have literally only a handful of defaults on the platform because really Bitcoiners, they don't want to sell their Bitcoin. They just want to use it as an asset, borrow against it, instead of selling it, paying tax for it, and then losing the upside. So that's why they want to stick to it. And the worst case scenario, they would rather repay the loan than to get liquidated. And that's actually a big motivation for the lenders because obviously their actual yield on their investment is much better than whatever they agreed at the very beginning.
So now I have a very specific question. During the BTC collateral deposit, it says do not send a smaller amount and do not bump a fee. What will happen if I send a smaller amount or bump a fee?
So yeah, this is a tricky one. Depending on the fees on blockchain, you either can get into the first block or then you would need to wait for couple of hours even. What normally under normal circumstances people do is I send the transaction and I see that I'm in the third block, so I would have to wait for, I don't know, maybe an hour. I want to speed up the process so I can bump the fee. But the way our product or the protocol itself actually is structured is that, once you create the escrow, there's a particular address, and if you were bumping the fee, it would kind of break the contract and your Bitcoin could end up sort of in a limbo for some time. There are always ways how to recover it, of course. But if users need to speed up the process, the easiest way is to tell us, we can help with that. We do not recommend, or I would say we are pretty strict about it. Do not use the RBF replaced by fee when sending Bitcoin to the escrow.
How does your technical support work, especially during the moments of volatility?
Yeah, the easiest way is using the chat. If you log into the platform, there's a live agent. And naturally, a lot of questions are kind of repetitive, right? So the agent actually can support you or can help you with simple, or the more common questions, like, what happens if I don't receive the money and things like that. So that's the easiest way. Obviously, you can also contact us through email at hello@firefish.io. The best way is going through the platform, or actually, if you have any general question, you can go to our website. There's a document hub or a knowledge hub where you can see all the details about the platform, the technical descriptions, and FAQs. So you can use that source as well.
Firefish is a marketplace, right? Non-custodial marketplace. Why is KYC required?
I would say there are two things. Like, first and foremost, we are obviously not big fans of KYC, right? I mean, that's it is something. It's the necessary evil that we need to accept to be able to run the business. It would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to really running a non-KYC service where you are providing various different products apart from literally let's say crypto versus crypto. We also started with fiat, right? So if you're a borrower, you can actually basically receive euros, Swiss franc, dollars very soon as well. Having a non-KYC service with fiat transactions would be almost impossible. It would be just a matter of time if one of the banks would raise the alarms and would go after us. Due to the nature of the business, as I said, we do not like KYC, but it is a necessary evil that we had to accept. It's also basically I would say, protection in a way in case something really goes wrong with Firefish, with the counterparties. You have a legal agreement with the counterparty. It has pros and cons, but it is the price of the business we have to pay.
Do you automatically report to tax agencies like IRS or?
No. There's no automatic reporting, obviously, happening. Obviously, if someone, if there's some sort of a criminal, which would be also tricky because once you get KYC, basically you understand that you're giving up on your details. But if there was some criminal case, if someone was involved in some criminal case and the courts or police would come to us asking for some details, we would have to disclose them. But we are not at this point in time proactively reporting any details anywhere.
Have you ever had a situation where police or other authorities requested information or details?
No. There are a lot of scams, as we know, especially in crypto. That's like on daily basis. You hear stories about people getting rug pulled or scammed outright. Our users really are, especially from the Bitcoin space, are people who know what's the value of Bitcoin, why they're using it. They really have real life use cases. So at this point in time, or until now, we haven't had a single case where someone would have to be investigated or we would have to disclose data to police.
A few weeks ago, when Bitcoin was falling hard, the Strike website went offline. Jack Moeller said it was due to a DDoS attack. And it happened right when users were trying to add more collateral to their loans. What does Firefish do to make sure the platform stays online during moments like that?
Yeah, I mean, we saw this, and we also got a couple of questions. These kind of attacks. It's sometimes very difficult to avoid them. I think this is always the worst time, like when the market is going against you, and you don't want to lose your Bitcoin. You want to top up, and suddenly the platform goes offline and all that, right? So for certain types of attacks, it's really difficult to basically or avoid these kind of attacks. At the same time, we've been working with a lot of security experts, and in Bitcoin in particular, as I said, people are very sort of down to earth, and they do not trust anyone. They really respect the privacy, they respect quality of technology, robustness, and things like that. So we've done a lot of work around improving our tech stack. One thing, we've also just recently received the MiCA license, which is the pan-European sort of crypto license. And that process, also part of the process, was focused on the technology, the resiliency, and all the aspects of your whole tech setup. So we have done a lot of work in this space. Honestly speaking, I don't know if any particular attack, be it DDoS, be it some other hack, might not impact us. That's we've seen also outages on Amazon or AWS. We've seen outages on Cloudflare, which is like super important service that basically the whole internet is built on. But as I said, like we've been really trying to focus on this, on really security and resiliency of the infrastructure, and hope this kind of issues will not happen to us. But as I said, there are always bad players out there, people who don't like you for whatever reasons. So we want to just make sure that we are prepared for such moments.
Let's talk about the most recent drop. How many liquidations did you have?
So yes, in the last, I think it was last Thursday, when we saw Bitcoin really started dropping significantly, the first thing we've noticed is that people really starting topping up. So we had like around 5,000 top-ups within basically the particular time range, because really, as I said, our Bitcoiners, our borrowers do not want to lose their Bitcoin. We did have a couple of liquidations happening. We also published the number on our X channel. I think it was around $2 million, which was roughly 1.2% of all the deals. The fact that people were topping up, some of them were also repaying earlier, really prevented a lot of borrowers to get liquidated. So overall, I mean, it wasn't as gigantic as one would expect, thanks to the fact that people could top up. But at the same time, yes, there were a number of borrowers that were impacted. And this is, as I said, coming to your first question, what are the risks? I think this is the most significant risks that borrowers are facing on the platform.
Now let's talk about banks. Since Firefish users deal with fiat, what happens if money gets stuck on the bank side? I had this situation myself a couple of weeks ago. How are situations like that handled? What does the resolution process look like?
Yeah, so two things. I mean, the key point of the marketplace is that it's in nature peer-to-peer, right? So if I'm the borrower, I lock my Bitcoin, you're the lender, you send money to my bank account. And the banks are getting more and more stricter about the transactions. Now they're also, just I think last year, there's this new rule that you need to specify the address of the person, and the name has to be in proper format and things like that. So they're making our life more and more difficult. What would happen in case that, you send the money to me and I don't receive the money? Then we would start what we call a resolution process. Normally what happens is that when you're sending the money, and your bank is looking at the history of your transaction, like, you've been buying groceries and paying some bills, and then suddenly you're sending 50K to someone in Portugal, which you never did before. That might raise alerts, and the bank would maybe stop the payment and start checking with you, checking the counterparty, if this is a legit transfer and all that. So these kind of delays definitely can happen. The same applies to me as the borrower. You send the money, it goes through your bank, and my bank then also looks at the transaction, says like, hey, suddenly there's a 50K euros coming to your bank account, and they would start asking me questions, right? So We were also trying to foresee all these kind of issues and really try to avoid these kind of resolutions, because the money eventually will end up somewhere. Either it would be returned to you, or it would be then deposited to my account. Sometimes it might take a couple of more days. But normally what happens in, I would say, 95% of cases is that when the bank is asking like the source of funds, like where is the money coming from, you can actually download from the platform a document that proves that you have taken peer-to-peer loan in this particular currency. It came from this account. There are no names mentioned. It just says what's the process. We also do not mention that it's Bitcoin, because a lot of banks are still kind of have allergy towards crypto. So you can use these documents, and as I said, in a vast majority of cases, this helped our users with this particular resolution, right? So these KYC ML procedures are making our life a bit more difficult, and therefore we've decided to partner actually with one institution, like payment institution basically, that will help us to set up your own accounts, banking accounts on our platform, right? So instead of sending money, from your bank to the counterparty's bank, you would be transacting actually on the platform. So you can deposit money to your own account on the platform, and then you would just sending the money automatically, basically through the platform itself. So this would then remove, I would say, vast majority of questions that the banks might have.
What's the typical loan size you see on Firefish? And another question, what was the largest loan ever taken on Firefish?
The average ticket on the platform overall is, I would say, roughly around 10K, because we actually do support the minimum ticket is from 800, and the sky's the limit, as we would say. The biggest ticket that we've processed was at this point in time, I think it was around $1 million loan for a big institution.
Now let's talk about the Firefish team. How big is the Firefish team today?
2 years ago, it was only like 4 or 5 of us. Actually, we always joke that our first employee was a lawyer, because we've decided, going the hard way, and we kind of could understand the complexities of the jurisdictions and all these legal issues around. But currently the team is around 20-25 people. We have a big development team. We have part of the development team focusing purely on Bitcoin, so the core protocol part, the implementation, the library itself. Obviously there we have a number of support people and business development in general. So it's around 20-25 people.
Are they all based in Czech?
We're mostly based in Prague, though we have a couple of people also in other cities around Europe, right? So we have basically a couple of people that we collaborate, not on full-time basis, but on sort of part-time or collaborative basis, basically, that are in other countries, but the core of the team is here in Prague, yes.
Is Prague really becoming the EU Bitcoin capital?
It's not becoming, it is actually, to be honest.
You've got the Bitcoin Prague conference, right? Trezor is headquartered there. What else?
That's the thing. I mean, if you look at also the history and what's been happening, I would start with Trezor, so Satoshi Labs, right? The first hardware wallet in the world coming from Prague. Brains pool, used to be called Slush Pool, was the first mining pool in the world. So there was another first. General Bytes, a big company that was the first provider of ATMs for Bitcoin. So most of the ATMs around the world that you will see also coming from General Bytes, the company based here in Prague. BTC Prague, which is the Bitcoin conference, the biggest one in Europe, actually is also taking place here. Now we've got Firefish as well. And also just recently, the central bank, the Czech central bank, was the first central bank that bought actually Bitcoin into part of their portfolio, right? So there's a lot of things going on here. There are many theories like why Prague is actually the center of Bitcoin, but I would say it's partially due to the historical reasons. We used to be sort of part of the Eastern Bloc, and Czechs never liked masters. They've been always kind of free thinking and liberal and kind of open-minded, and Bitcoin really very much resonates. There's also this service in Prague where you go to a restaurant where you just scan the QR code, where you see the menu, you can order, you can pay the bill also in Bitcoin. And the same applies, the biggest, some sort of we call it a local Amazon here in Czech Republic. You can also buy these various products from this local vendor with Bitcoin. So there's a lot of opportunities to use Bitcoin. And as I said, like for historical reasons, Prague really has become the center.
Yeah, Prague is a beautiful city also. One of the most beautiful in Europe, at least.
Definitely.
Firefish raised $1.8 million in seed funding from Brains and Prague-based VC Mitten. Tell us more about your investors. What convinced them to back Firefish?
Well, so the very first investor were actually Mitten, which is I would say, major venture firm based also here in Prague. They are more of a generalist fund, but they also have a crypto arm. They invested in multiple crypto projects. So for them, crypto business was nothing particularly new. They actually like the use case, right? They really like the idea of Bitcoiners having the opportunity to borrow against their Bitcoin, collateralize it in a very secure way. We just shared with them our white paper, which was just full of crazy ideas, and they said yes, we want to support you. So that was really great. So they're great partners of us. Brains happened last year. Actually, it's been kind of easy for us to talk to them because they're based in Prague, they're our friends. But at the same time, if you imagine or if you think about their business, basically, so they're running a pool. They have also some software solutions for the miners, and miners themselves are the natural borrowers. They're the biggest sellers of Bitcoin because their revenues are actually in Bitcoin, yet they have to buy hardware, pay electricity, pay operating costs, and things like that. So every time a miner sells Bitcoin, there's a little teardrop on it. So for miners in general, using Bitcoin as a collateral is a no-brainer. So Brains actually really love this idea that they could actually integrate Firefish as a financial service basically on their platform and provide it to their customers. So for them, it was a very nice kind of puzzle added into their ecosystem. So that's why we agreed on the deal and the collaboration, and I think it's a really great partnership with them as well.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else we should know about Firefish?
Yeah, the one thing I would actually point out, we along with Brains, we've published a book called Bitcoin: The Ultimate Collateral. You can find it on our website, firefish.io/book. It kind of guides you through the idea, honestly speaking, some of the Bitcoiners do not get the idea, why should I actually borrow against my Bitcoin? Until the moment comes and they have a need to sell their Bitcoin because they need some funding or they have an investment opportunity, they want to send their kids to school or whatever other reasons, right? So I would definitely promote this book and just go through it. It gives you a lot of great ideas.
Igor, thanks again for taking the time. Really appreciate you breaking all this down and sharing the Firefish story with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us, and see you later.
I'ma keep it a stack. People doubted my talent, really just wanted me to react. Perseverance ain't what I lack. Haters see you've got potential, then they've got something against you. Always have an opinion and hoping that